So we have this add smoothie recipe form right here. Now, I said we'd address this section right here because we don't know how many ingredients a user wants to add. Right now, we're only allowing one, but they could have 4 or 5, but I don't want to hard code 4 or 5 different input fields in there because there might be less, and that looks messy. So how do we tackle this? Well, what I'd like to do is to allow the user to type in an ingredient right here. Then, when they want to add that ingredient, they just press the tab button to add that ingredient to the list. Now, when they do that, that item will be shown here on the screen somewhere, and then this input box will be cleared, so that then they can add another item by typing in and pressing tab again. Now, another way of doing this, instead of pressing tab, would be to add a little button over here or something, with a little plus icon next to it, so that when they enter in an item and press on this button, it does exactly the same thing. But I'm doing it this way so that when they press tab, it adds it, so that we can have a little practice with event modifiers. So we need to do the following. We need to detect when a user clicks tab in this field right here. Now that's a key down event with a tab modifier attached to it, because that means they want to add that ingredient. Then when we detect that, we need to fire a function which will check what's in this input field, and then it will take that value and push it to an ingredients array stored on our component. Then we need to clear this input field so that we can add another ingredient if we want to. So let's try doing that then. So over in our add smoother component, the first thing I want to do is attach an event to this input field right here, so that when a user tabs on it, we can fire that function to detect what a user has typed in. So the way we do that is by doing @ to say we want to attach an event to it. The event that we want to attach is a key down event, so when a user presses a key, because they're going to press the tab key, right? So key down, and then we want to attach the modifier to say only when it's the tab key. So this key down event is only going to fire when the key down is a tab. So we then need to equal this to some kind of function. And this function is going to be called add ing for add ingredient. I'm also going to attach a v model to this, which is going to be equal to another. So basically, whenever a user types into this, we're going to detect the value inside that field and associate it with this data property called another, which will place down here another, and that is going to be set to null to begin with. Okay, so now we need to create this method right here. So let's do that after add smoothie. We'll say add ing for add ingredient, and then inside this method, what do we want to do? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this value is not null, because if it's null, it means that a user's not typed anything into the field yet. So we don't want to add anything if it's null. So first of all, we'll say if this dot another. So if that's true, it means it's not null. So then we want to add it to the ingredients array. Now we don't have an ingredients array yet, so let's create one. We'll say ingredients and set this equal to an empty array to begin with. Okay, so every time a user adds an ingredient and clicks tab, we want to fire this function to check if another is not null. If it's not null, we want to take that ingredient and we want to add it into this array. So the way we do that is by saying this dot ingredients to refer to this thing right here. Then we want to push something onto that. So we'll say dot push, and the thing we want to push is this dot another. Remember, this dot another is this thing right here, the value of this input field, the ingredient. So we're going to take that now and push it to this thing. Then what we'll do is we'll log out the ingredients. We'll say console.log this.ingredients, just so we can see them. Okay, let's save that and view this in a browser. I'm going to open up the console so we can see these ingredients as they're added. Smoothie title, doesn't really matter. Mario, magic, and then add an ingredient, banana. Okay, if I add smoothie now, check out the console. If I add smoothie, then we see the title, but also if I press tab now, then we see this thing right here. We see the ingredients with banana in. Now, if I wanted to add another ingredient, I'd have to go and delete this at the minute and type in another. I'll do mushroom. And now we have banana and mushroom when I click tab. So every time I click tab, it's adding something into this ingredients array, which is cool. Now, we don't really want to have to delete this manually every time, so let's combat that. What we'll do is, instead of logging this to the console right now, we'll say this dot another is now equal to null. We'll reset it to null. So then, because these two are associated with each other, this and this field, when it's updated here, it updates here as well. So then it will delete the current value of that field. So if we try this now, I'm going to save it and check this out over here. I'll say mushroom, then press tab, and then it deletes it. Okay, so it's added it to the array, but now we can add another one easily. But also watch what happens. I'll type in another banana. I'll press tab, and the default behavior of a tab is to go to the next field on the form. So we're no longer in here in focus, we have to click into it again. Now, that's not great either. So what I'd like to do is prevent that default action, that default behavior, when a user clicks tab. So what we'll do is go up here and add on another modifier, prevent. Now we're preventing that default behavior of the tab key. So if we save this now, I'm going to check this out another time in the browser. I'll type in mushroom, tab. Now we remain in focus inside this field, and I can do it again, banana, etc. So that's good. Now we're able to add multiple different ingredients to this thing right here, this array. So now we're storing those. So we said we only wanted to add something if this was not null. Now, if it is null, what we want to do is provide some feedback to a user to say something like, you must enter a value to an ingredient, all right, to add an ingredient. So we'll say else, and then down here, we'll say this dot feedback. Now, we've not created this property feedback yet, but we'll do it in a minute and set that equal to, you must enter a value to add an ingredient. Okay. So now we want to create a feedback property, which to begin with, again, will be null, because when you first load the component, we don't want to give them any feedback, only when they do something maybe incorrect. So now what we want to do is output this feedback if it exists, if this is updated. So what we'll do is add some feedback now just above the button. So we'll go here and do a p tag. And we only want this to show if there is some feedback. If it's null, we don't need it to show. So we'll say v-if and set this equal to feedback. So as long as it's null, it's not going to show. But as soon as feedback is updated with something like this down here, then this will be true and it will show. So inside this, what we'll do is output the feedback property. And we also want to give this a class of red text to make it stand out, so red-text. So let's save this, test this out in a browser. Now, if I come in here, don't add anything and press tab, you'll notice this thing now, you must enter a value to add an ingredient. So that's good. But if we now do something like this, mushroom and tab, then we still see this thing right here. So if we're typing something in that is valid, we then want this to disappear, right? We don't want it always to be there. So what we can do is, inside here, if we do add something, we can say this.feedback then becomes null again. All right. So we're clearing out the form field and we're also clearing out the feedback once they've added an ingredient. So let's try this out. We'll say tab, you must enter a value. Then we'll say banana and we'll tab. And now that clears out. So that's good as well. Okay, so just one more thing I'd like to do. I'd like to log out the ingredients right here. This.ingredients. When we click submit, just to make sure all of this stuff that we've been doing in this video is indeed working. So we'll save that now and we'll go over here, smoothie title, Mario Magic, and ingredient banana, tab, and mushroom, tab, and peaches, tab. Okay, so now if we click add smoothie, then we can see Mario Magic, banana, mushroom, and peaches. So we've successfully grabbed all that information. So we could go off now and we could add that to the database. But there's one more thing I want to do before we do that, and that is to output the ingredients here on the page as a user types them in, because right now I've added them, but I might forget what I've added. So I like to see a visual representation of them as I add them individually. So if I type in banana, press tab, then that comes up here above so I can see I've added it. Okay, so we'll do that in the next video.